A strength a day, be your best every day. Hi, I'm Adimus, founder and director of Strength Optimizer. I aim to help you stay healthy, be happier, and deal with challenges with greater resilience. Do you miss the interstate and international traveling to your favorite holiday destinations? What if there's a way to create these similar traveling experiences despite the COVID pandemic and at the same time create your well-being and sustainability? Today, you will meet Dr. Gael Brule from Switzerland. Gael will show you how you can engage in micro-traveling while at the same time fostering your well-being and sustainability. Thank you. Hi, I'm Dimas, founder and director of Strength Optimizer. Thank you for watching Strength Optimizer's The Science Up Your Wellbeing series. Today, we have Dr. Gael Brule joining us all the way from Switzerland. Gael is originally from France. He is a researcher, author, and speaker. He has a PhD in happiness studies from the Erasmus University of Rotterdam. He's also a postdoctorate researcher at the University of Geneva. His current interests focus on sustainability and well-being, especially micro-traveling. I'm so grateful to have you joining us today. Gael, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for having me.
No worries. And thank you once again for taking the time to share with us rather, for me, new concept called micro-traveling, which is a form of traveling that combines sustainability and well-being. But before that, Gail, let's talk about your PhD in happiness studies. I mean, some people may approach the science of happiness with some sort of skepticism. For example, do you really need to have a PhD to learn how to be happy or teach people how to be happy? How do you respond to the so-called happiness skeptics?
Well, I think the qualms about happiness are perfectly fine and they're sound, The as a scientist working on happiness, I mean, science always works with skepticism. So I think in to some extent, it's good. It's good to have criticism to which we can reply. It forces us to think better, sometimes to redirect the way we approach our work. So I say in general that, well, first, you don't need a PhD to be happy, thankfully.
Thankfully.
Otherwise, it would be rather, a small circle.
Yeah.
You don't need either actually a PhD to tell someone how to be happy, which is actually something I don't do. I don't tell people how to be happy. I mean, to one person in particular.
Yeah.
I could not tell you, for instance, because we just know each other since a few minutes.
Yes.
I couldn't tell you how you will be happy because I don't know much about you. And happiness is also about, it's intimately linked with identity, about, the person, the person. However, what we do when we study happiness is we try to understand what are the conditions for the most people to thrive. It's a different question. I'm not telling, Adimus, you will be happy 100% if you do that. What I can tell you, however, is, I don't know, most people that live in small city are happier than people living in large cities, for instance. It's a bit of a different way of speaking. And from that fact, you will say, okay, well, it makes sense to me, or it doesn't,
Yeah.
So I would say that qualms are fine. Some are more founded than some others. For instance, people say, I don't know, happiness is too intimate, so to be a science. And it's only partly true because actually, what can for instance, we all need to be heard or to be respected. What it means for you or what it means for me are different, can be different things. It can be about your work, it can be about respected by your neighbors, for your sexuality, different things. But the inherent need of being respected is universal.
Yeah.
So it's not so much that it is so personal that you cannot study it. There are different forms, but there are also universal needs and wants, for
Yeah.
people to be happy.
Excellent, excellent. So on one hand, happiness can perceive as having what we call a subjective element, in the sense that there are individual differences, understanding and experience when it comes to happiness. But then happiness can also be studied as what are constructs under the scientific discipline, where it can actually be defined, operationalized, and measured. And I like the way that you're saying that the reasons, or at least one of the main focus of your research, not so much so or telling people how to be happy, but look at the conditions that potentially can cultivate or promote a sense of happiness. And you also talk about happiness is like the need belonging, or need or wanting to be respected. It is universe. It's almost like universe. At the end of the day, most people will agree that yes, if I can be happier, then I'd like to take that.
Yes, exactly. And it will take different forms, I mean, for instance, the common stereotype is that in Asia, it's more, people can be more communitarian, whereas in Western country, people can be more individualistic. However, I mean, the social forms, it will take more community, more society, can be different, but the bonding itself is absolutely, I mean, unless in very extreme cases, is necessary to anyone to be happy. People need to connect. People need to be surrounded with people they love. People need to be surrounded with people they respect. And when that is the case, it's easier for people to be happy. And when it is not, it is harder. So there is some part of objectivity in there. And of course, we do not explain 100% of happiness in our studies. We explain a part of it, and it's also maybe more beautiful that way. Part of it is also mystery, if you wish. But I think it's we're working, and I mean it's also a large community. I mean, a community of researchers around the world to try to understand better and to see what we can have objective. Knowing that we will never get to, 100% of knowing it all.
Yeah. That's why we use the word scientific discovery. Is ongoing discovering and understanding, and perhaps putting it apart and rebuilding again.
Absolutely discovering, and it's I tend to say that it's a teamwork. We're standing on the shoulders of the giants. Our predecessors, and my PhD professors, others. The one that have founded the field, and we owe them a lot, and we're just continuing that work and so on and so on. It's a teamwork.
That's excellent. That's good. So as a happiness scientist or happiness researcher, how is happiness defined and measured from your perspective or from your research?
I think it's a good question, and it's a very important one, because the way researchers on happiness work with happiness can be somewhat different from the everyday conception of it. So essentially there are three main ways. One is called the hedonic way. It's how do you feel? How did you feel yesterday? Did you feel good? And so on and so on, which is the closest one from the way people use it in the daily life. But there are as well two conceptions that can be a bit wider or further from the everyday conception. One is called the eudaimonic one. It's to what extent you find meaning in your life. It's already a bit more, you could say, philosophical, to link to Aristotle and other people like this. And the last one, which is probably the most used, is evaluative conception of happiness. And in this one, we tend to say, how much do you like your life? To what extent are you satisfied with the life you lead or you live? And this is the one concept and the one measure we use the most. And I think it's important to state this because it's quite different. When I tell about my research, people tend to think of happiness, yes, I'm happy right now. But it's not what we measure so much. We measure more. I tend to like my life in general these days. It's quite close to what I would like it to be. It's a bit more of a cognitive, of a mental measure that people use it on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Good. So as mentioned earlier, there are three different conceptualizations of happiness, or the definitions of happiness, moving from the hedonic, which is more looking at the feelings, positive emotion elements, the pleasure, then move on to eudaimonic, which is more focusing on the meaning and purpose of life, and then to the evaluative, which refers to a sense of life satisfaction, so where I am right now, and am I moving towards closer to the ideal, perhaps, that I'm moving to, and using that as part of the definition or concept to explain or unpack happiness. Would that be correct to say so?
Yeah, this really, I mean, these are really three families, and you're right. You define them correctly, and each researcher tend to choose, one sort of field, because they are, they tell different stories. If you go to hedonic or eudaimonic or evaluative, still, I would say many researchers work on the evaluative field or evaluative conception of happiness.
Yep. Good. And I also know that, correct me if I'm wrong, part of your research is also focused on what makes people happy and unhappy. So maybe you can unpack for us a little bit more based on your research findings, again, what makes people happy and unhappy, but of course also depending to the conceptualizations that you're using in your research as well.
So there are many, let's say, factors people have been looking at to know what makes people happy and unhappy. Researchers have been looking at money. They've been looking at family, household, civil status. Are single people, married, people with children. People have been looking at jobs. People have. There are really. I mean, we can go to each field that you want, because there are so many of them. One field on which I've been working quite extensively is the feeling of having control over your life.
Okay.
It is one of the strongest predictor of happiness, meaning that people who tend to feel that they have some control over their life, that their life is going to some extent the way they want, the way they're pushing, they tend to be happy people.
Yeah.
On the opposite, when you hear people saying, "Oh yeah, this didn't depend on me, this kind of fell on me," having a bit more of a passive language, of having a bit more external language, meaning that, "Oh yeah, my fate is driven by external forces." These are, in general, people that are not so happy. And this is very important because it touches to almost every field of your life. It touches to a political system. There are political, as you said at the beginning, I live in Switzerland, which has direct democracy. Direct democracy is one of these political systems that empowers people the most, because citizens are almost asked on a weekly or monthly basis, to in which direction you should go. And this is very empowering in the way, people, the control people have on their political life. Yeah. If you go to a dictatorship, of course, you will have much less control, because, everything, not so much depends on you. Same goes for the work life. If you go to a very, very vertical organization, your margin of action will be much smaller than if you are in a horizontal structure that will enable you to determine more, your choices, what you want to do. And this can go, I'm talking about political life, work life, but this can go to any sphere of your life. You can work in a non-profit, you can work in among your friends, in your family, anywhere. But people who feel they have control over their life tend to be happier.
If I may interpret it slightly different, so when you use the word control, does it also involve a sense of agency or a sense of autonomy? That if I do something, then to a degree that it can, or at least it should happen according to the way that I expect or the way that I plan.
It's quite close to indeed agency, actually. So there are different terms, as often agency is one. locus of control is the one I've been using the most, but these are, quite close. Yeah, essentially it is about, a feeling that the things that happen to you are at least to a good degree driven by your desires, by your will, by your what you want to do.
Yeah. Okay. What about the other school of thought? I mean, of course, you would take it to, I'm not taking it to the extreme, but sometimes people will also say that people who are happy-go-lucky, that means that they relinquish a sense of control can also be a contributor of happiness, because if you holding on things too tight and want to control every single element, then you can end up to be a control freak, when we use the term, or miserable.
You touch a right point here. We haven't really looked at the. I'm assuming there would be an optimum, and you're right, meaning that because we cannot control everything, we should also at some point accept that some part is beyond our control. So if I had to maybe specify, be a bit more precise, it would be about controlling the things you can control and accepting the rest that you cannot, because obviously, we all face, harsh events. I've been working also on how people react, when they face the death of a close related person, when they face handicap, when they face unemployment or separation. These are events we all face during our lives. Well, obviously, this goes way beyond your control. I mean, so you will have to have some resources as well to let it go. So you touch a right point. There is a balance here about what you can control and what you cannot.
I guess that this is especially evident or relevant in the pandemic period that we are in right now, where in a lot of countries it seems that people are losing a sense of control because of direct orders and legal mandatory restrictions that's imposed in the name of the public health, which is important and necessary. But yet, I guess that you also expand that it's almost having this wisdom to know what are the things that we can exercise control to produce a desirable outcome, but also having this courage to know that there are things that are outside of control. I have the resources to be able to let them go, so that we're not trapped in this cycle that I got to control every single element of my life.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the pandemic has been an exercise for everybody, to kind of learn that, because our horizon has been reduced. I often say that the happiness is the size of the horizon. People who have more options are happier. People who see less options are less happy. But in that case, there is also some objectivity behind it. I mean, our horizon of possibility has dramatically reduced, in the last, last year or more. And I think we've learned, or we've had to learn the hard way, and some have not. Some did not manage to do that, to accept this reduced possibility, because we could do less, we could see less people, and so on and so on. Some people have lost their job, and it's so I think this whole event has been has revealed a lot what we individually and collectively could handle on that side. You're right.
That's right. And I guess that one of the major limitations or restrictions as a result of the pandemic is our limitations of doing international traveling. Which comes back to one of the very interesting topic called micro-traveling. So what exactly is micro-travel or micro-traveling?
So micro-travel, actually, it came, or it's a concept we discussed with some friends and colleagues during the pandemic, because we said, okay, well, one, we all like to travel. I mean, most people like to travel. Two, we cannot. I mean, at the moment, it's impossible. And three, there is an ecological crisis in any case that should force us to travel less or travel differently. And there would be one way to say, well, let's not travel at all anymore. And I find it highly, it's depressive. It's a depressive view. And, I said, why not just traveling differently? Why not thinking that our daily life is full of travel? Why not thinking that when you just take a walk and when you take your, I don't know, child to the school, or when you take a walk in the park, or when you do just an afternoon travel, walk, why not qualifying this as a travel? That's what I call the micro travel.
Yeah.
It's a way of traveling, so we keep the traveling experience, without damaging so much the environment, and without which is still, let's say, COVID friendly, because or restriction friendly, because we can still do it during the pandemic. So I think it's a way to face that tension that we're all facing at the moment.
All right. So it's a shift of mindset, because obviously when we talk about traveling, at least for me, immediately talking about aeroplane, talking about traveling to another country or an island or a tropical forest with lots of suitcases, with a book accommodations, with the expectations that I just going to not to so-called engage with the routine part of my life and simply choose, let my head down. But you're saying that micro travel involves, perhaps I may use the word, being very mindful in terms of our day-to-day interactions with our environment, with the nature, and deliberately put on this mindset that actually it doesn't necessarily, traveling doesn't necessarily always have to involve aeroplane or lots of baggages or suitcases.
Exactly. I think it's really about changing. It's a shift of mindset. As you say, we all have pictures of what is and you described yours of what is a travel. I mean, and these were different a century ago, and these will be different in a century. So, I mean, it's just a matter of, saying, why not qualifying this? It's also about qualifying it, because, traveling is highly social. When you go to your work, and, you said, okay, what did you do during your holidays? And you said, oh, I traveled here, and you traveled there, and so on and so on. And there's a big part, which is comparative as well. People compare, where they've been traveling and so on and so on. And also something that's kind of strange, which I've often noticed, is that people say, oh yeah, well, they've been traveling everywhere, but sometimes they don't even know the closest museum close to their place, or just a park that's, 5 miles or 5 kilometers away. Just because they keep traveling everywhere, but they haven't really traveled in their place. And if you think of someone like David Henry Thoreau, the American philosopher, when he was asked, because he was walking everywhere all the time, and he was asked one day, so you've been traveling a lot? And he said, yes, I've traveled quite a bit in Concord, which was the place where he was born. So to him, way before us, traveling had nothing to do with the kilometers or with the distance, or with it was much more of a mindset. And if we shift this mindset, it could be, which is indeed, it has to do with mindful and a bunch of other things. Well, it can be that we've been traveling every day, and so with other friends and colleagues, we've been starting to have a community of people writing about daily or our expedition on 2 days, very close to their place, and people said at the end, well, that felt great, because I didn't realize how much I did in this one-day travel. Thinking about this smile you shared with a person, or this thing that you would not see, because sometimes we're also in an automatic mode, And well, this is about micro traveling is about changing this.
Okay, so in the context of well-being and sustainability, how does micro travel actually relate to these two concepts, or these two practices?
So I think to sustainability, it's quite, I think that's exactly the link between the two, the missing link between the two, because traveling makes us can bring us happiness, right? But traveling kills our ecological footprint, most of the time. That's really, and at some point I felt really this tension was almost hard to reconcile. And in Swedish, there is a term called flugsam, which is the how do you say, the how bad you can feel, the shame you feel when you take a plane. And at some point I said, okay, we're going to have this tension between well-being and sustainability is going to be irreconcilable on traveling. So actually, micro traveling is the one way I think to bring these two together.
Yeah. All right. What about the element of well-being? Obviously, from a conceptual level, I get it in the sense that the beauty and the benefits of micro traveling, but I guess that again, I'm just making a generalized statement here. There could be still some form of resistance from people, especially when they have this fixed concept of traveling, and traveling means overseas, and that brings me happiness. And now you're asking me to explore my neighborhoods, my community. Once again, how can we actually, I guess, slowly shift the mindset or even break the mindset and link it back to our day-to-day well-being?
Well, mindsets change all the time. What we used to consider, for instance, materialism was the meaning of well-being in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and it still is for part of the population. But you can see that it does not make people, well, first we know from the studies that it does not make us so happy.
Yeah.
And you can see that new generations start to really get away from forms of materialism. So our mindsets change all the time, and our mindsets orient or induce our well-being. I'm not saying it's going to be easy and that everyone is going to shift to micro traveling tomorrow, and some will find it boring, and some will say, well, it does not replace traveling. But first, do we really have a choice? And second, I think it's a very for the ones who will, it's a very, very pleasant exercise, because precisely you can realize that the well-being you derive from I don't know, a travel 10,000 kilometers away from your place, you can have just the same very close to your place, and much closer, much cheaper, much more frugal in a way. And I think it's a very to me it's a very enlightening exercise. I say, okay, well, I did make it. This did bring me as much pleasure, joy, and discovery as a trip much farther. So
yeah. Sounds like, again, micro travel can be a form of alternative, especially for people who are open to experiment, open to explore, open to embrace it. It is another alternatives, another possibilities. Because sometimes when it comes to 10,000 miles of traveling, one of the very common comments that people make is after having a holiday, they come back and say that, oh, I need another holiday for the holiday because I was too busy doing all this crazy stuff, but then not actually really get into the essence of traveling, which is discovering, slowing down, relaxing, recharging, spending time with a significant other. Sometimes we can easily distracted by all the fancy activities, and therefore when they come back, I need another holiday after coming back from a holiday.
Exactly, and I would even say that most of us, when we travel, we don't actually discover, because we're looking to find a form of stereotypes that was sold to us in the media and on social media and so on and so on. So when people go, they travel to Paris, they want to see the Eiffel Tower. When they travel to, I don't know, to New York, they want to see the Statue of the Liberty, and so on and so on. So people are actually not, most of us are not actually looking to discover, or they don't go there with an open eye. They just go there to find what was, what others have experienced, which is the reason why, the famous anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss, he said, I hate travels. He said it, in the 50s or 60s. And he didn't mean by that that he didn't like to move around. He just said that he hated the empty way of moving around without the open eyes, you know?
Yeah.
So I would say that, and I think on the opposite, you can go micro traveling in your community or maybe an hour away from your place and have a very open eye. And that's, I think, what David Henry Thoreau was doing. And going back to the well-being, actually writing about it afterwards is one way of being thankful and actually increase your well-being.
I guess it's also one way of savoring the life experiences as well, the specific traveling experience, especially when you're writing it down. Yeah, I still remember that, and I'm guilty of that as well. In those days when I could travel, a lot of time I use my phones to see rather than using my eyes to see. What it means, I was busy capturing photos, especially with, I have kids, and every time I'm just asking my son to pose on this specific touristy destination, take photos, take videos, and come home, just share the picture and the video, but without really actually savor that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's something we've all experienced, you know. I think we've all seen that photo with I think it's a sport even, with everyone recording their phone, and there's just one old lady just watching it, and she looks like an alien because we're all capturing and saying, okay, enjoying afterwards, the picture and the way we're gonna put it on, share it on social media. I don't call that mere enjoyment, it's really more about sharing and about also comparing, to others. And I think micro traveling is about shifting this.
Yeah. So for people who are keen to explore and experiment this micro traveling, what are some practical steps they can suggest for them to start playing with it, start engaging in it?
Well, I think the first one is really just to start about a nice place close to your home and try to really go there so you go there like you would travel. You go there with a backpack, and you take your water, and you take your camera and so on. And you can, and really about having the same the same look that you would have if you go 10,000 kilometers away. You're still going to look at people like, oh, they're different, but maybe people that is in another neighborhood are also a bit different, and but you don't pay attention anymore. You don't look at them. You don't. You're really in much more automatic mode. And maybe you smile to that person, or maybe you saw something a bit extraordinary, not crazy extraordinary, but you didn't pay attention. So I would say it's really about looking, and also about, I think writing afterwards is a good exercise, because it forces you to acknowledge that you've experienced this.
Yeah. So of
and
course,
then I think it becomes a practice, I think, afterwards.
So it sounds like it's also put on this curiosity mindset. What can I discover today, rather than going through the familiarity, as I say, using the autopilot mode? I've seen that, I heard that, I'm just whiz through my life, but this is actually again about slowing down, being curious, and again, be a tourist in your own neighborhood.
And look, I'm sure there are plenty of places you don't know about your place. Let's say in an hour radius, or in 100-kilometer radius, that you have no idea about, that are amazing, that are worth discovering, that people would travel from the other side of the world to see, that you haven't seen. I think that's one way to do it.
Excellent. Well, Gael, I have one last question for you. Got nothing to do with micro traveling. I'm just curious to find out, what is one thing that you have been doing this week to look after your well-being?
Something that I've been this week doing to look on my well-being.
Yeah.
Well, I called my mom. I think
Is she in France, your mom?
She's in France. She's in the west part of France, in Brittany.
Okay.
I spent more time than the previous week with my son, which is also, I think, these are important moments. And so I took a bit from from the time I would normally work to do that. And so again, I think it's a lot about the happiness about that. that turn off the autopilot mode, that I would normally do. I would be at work, from that to that hour, and then work a bit more on this. And I turned that off, and it's, immediately spend some quality time, with my son and calling my mom. And it made me happy. It made them happy. It's and happiness, can be built in the social fabrics, right? So,
absolutely. I can't quote any of the research studies on top of my head, but I'm sure that one of the consistent findings for a lot of happiness and well-being research when they talk about enhancing our well-being and happiness is to have these meaningful connections with people, a sense of connection, sense of intimacy, sense of belonging, and definitely spending time with our loved one. That is almost like one of the, for me personally, a golden rule, golden key to well-being and happiness.
It is a golden rule. We see it in most of our studies. So yeah, it is consistent.
Excellent. Thank you for backing me up.
So you're right.
That's
you're
right.
scientific enough.
Okay. All right. So Gael, that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you once again for joining us. And of course, for those of you who are watching or who are listening, if you want to engage Gael's expertise in micro-traveling, well-being, and sustainability, you can visit his website. I believe it's called gaelbrule.com. And when it comes to the micro-traveling, you can visit microtravelers.org. Am I right?
That's correct.
That's good. Well, thank you for watching. I'm Demus from Strong Optimizers. We are here to bring out the best in you by optimizing your strengths. Have a fabulous day, everyone. Goodbye.